Recently, a team from the International Monetary Fund released a report on the Nigerian economy under its Article 4, which covers variables such as the impact of COVID-19 on the economy, volatility in the prices of oil, and how these affect earning and spending power, government's response to the emerging challenges, and future projections. Joining us now to look at all of this is Tilewa Adebajo, Managing Director and Chief Executive Officer, CFG Advisory, a company that provides financial planning and investment advisory services for executives. Welcome to the program, sir. Good morning.
Thank you very much. Good morning.
I read that report and saw the graphs with all the precipitous plummeting in all of those graphs. And I thought about the American journalist Alfred Lewis in 1906, who said there are only 9 meals between mankind and anarchy. How close are we to that precipice? How bad is the situation really? And again, I looked at the graphs and I had to question the optimism of the CBN governor and our Minister of Finance saying that Nigeria will exit the recession in Q1 2021. Do you share that optimism?
Well, it's not about sharing the optimism, but more importantly, I think, is looking at what are you doing to ensure that that happens. And I think that for me, that was why I had to take a look at the historical references. I did a 6-year review of the Nigerian economy of the past 6 years, and then I tried to do the projection for the next 2 or 3 years to see what I've been hearing, what I've been saying about when we will exit this recession, and also try to use a lot of other international information to get these projections right. It is very difficult to see how we're going to pull out of this recession in first quarter of 2021, considering the fact that the stimulus that needs to grow the economy is not there. It is also important to see what exactly is the government doing. We used to have a National Economic Recovery Growth Plan before the COVID-19, and as a response to the pandemic, and I think in a preemptive move, the government came up with a National Economic Sustainability Plan, and of course revised the budget to be able to put the economy on a path of growth. The question we have to ask ourselves is that, are these measures working? And what exactly is the stimulus that the central bank providing? What impact is it having on the economy that we can see positive growth in the first quarter of next year?
So it's not based on much. That optimism is sort of, yeah, okay, Rufai.
I mean, Tundu, I share your fears very strongly. I mean, very grim one there when I saw the stats. And for me, it's indicative. Even recently, there was another report that Ruto shared with us this morning about, capital flows into the country. Out of about 1.5 billion, Lagos had 1.2 billion. Most states of the Federation, some zilch, some almost nothing, some no capital investment. We can't even attract monies from abroad. Recently, for the first time in a long time, the government spending has eclipsed the private sector spending in the economy. So government is spending all the money, but it's far-reaching. We have a very, very small pot to spend from. A less than 26, 27 billion budget every year, USD, I mean. The ARGP you talked about says, we'll grow at 7%, but that is sounding like a miracle now. How do we get ourselves out of this quagmire? And I am one of those that I don't believe, quote me anywhere, that COVID was a black swan event. We had gotten ourselves into this mud before COVID came. COVID just stamped us in the mud even further. How do we get out of this?
Well, the first way you get out of this is by understanding that you indeed have a problem. And I think it's important that we understand that. We have 3 very serious problems in this country with our economy. The fact is that in 2014, our GDP was about 570 billion. And we're projecting that the GDP will close at about 250 billion. That's a close to 300 billion loss of GDP. 300 billion loss of GDP is equivalent of Portugal's GDP, 3 times Ghana's GDP and 6 times Cameroon's GDP. That is what Nigeria has lost in the last 5 years. And the fact that our population is growing at 3.5% and we've not been able to achieve more than 2.5% economic growth over the last 5 years has exacerbated the situation. And I think for me, that is the biggest problem we're facing, and we need to reverse this very quickly. The second problem we're facing is the debt crisis. Nigeria is in an unsustainable debt position, and I think the president admitted in his budget speech that we're now in violation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. Our debt profile will now hit close to about $80 to $90 billion, and if we're not careful, by next year, our debt profile will be at $100 billion US, which is clearly unsustainable, considering the fact that 90% of our revenues are being used to service the debt. So what we need, I think, is for us to bring back all the economic management teams that we have to be able to put this economy on a path of growth. We need to be able to take some fiscal responsibility and insert fiscal discipline into the economy. We need to be able to get the central bank. Yes, the central bank has worked on monetary policy, but monetary policy in itself is not going to work. We need a combination and coordination of monetary policy, fiscal policy, trade policy, and investment policies. We need those 4 policy pillars working in synchronization to get the economy moving forward. Unfortunately, in Nigeria today, we do not have any economic leadership. We do not know who is driving the economy forward. And I think it's important that we identify somebody that will coordinate the economy and restore business confidence. Once you restore business confidence, the Nigerian economy is indeed very resilient. And I believe that with the right policy formulation and with the right direction and leadership, we should be able to get this out of the way. But I don't see that, and I do not see how even the economic sustainability plan is going to be implemented. There's still a lot of what I will call non-coordination between 4 critical ministries. Until we see that and proper direction, I don't think that we will see the growth that we require.
Oh dear. Yes, you did identify as the biggest challenges fiscal indiscipline and the budget deficit we continue to borrow to finance. And like you said, the president acknowledges that he's crossed that threshold of 3%. It's actually Section 12 of the Financial Responsibility Act. So this calls to mind the calls to amend that act and implement sort of punitive measures and allow people to actually give it teeth right now. Because it's one thing for the president to admit violating the law of the land and there are no consequences apart from the lives of the daily average Nigerian. What other legislative measures do you think we need to create controls? And you also identify the fact that you sort of bemoan the fact that what happened in the last recession has reoccurred now. So all of those buffers that ought to have been put in place simply were not, and this was always kind of inevitable. I'd like your comments on that too.
Well, as far as I'm concerned, we don't need any new legislative laws or to be able to help the Nigerian economy. Nigeria has one of the best investment promotion laws in the country today. Our corporate laws, I think, are very adequate. Our tax laws, I think, are adequate. So that really, for me, is not the issue. The issue has to do with the fact that, as you know, the last speaker you had said, our population, if we're not careful, is going to become a liability instead of an asset. If you have 50% unemployment and you have 100 million people in poverty, you're going to, especially with the insecurity, you're going to go into social unrest. So for me, the problem really is policy formulation. We need somebody that is going to understand the dynamics of the economy of this country, which is very powerful and resilient, and put it in the right direction. If you don't have the Ministry of Finance, the Ministry of Industry, Trade and Investment, the Central Bank, those 4 organizations really need to come together under the vice president or the president with clear policy definitions on how to make things work. You talked about the buffers. The buffers don't exist anymore. The excess crude oil account had only $75 million in it. The stabilization fund within the NSIA had maybe $150 million, and $100 million was taken out earlier in the year. In 2009, the excess crude account was under $20 billion US. That was significant, and that was what saw us through this whole problem. And again, like you said, the mistakes of having the buffers in place and not putting that in place is there. So my own issue is not the laws or what happens. My issue has to do with management and who is managing this economy, who is driving it, and who is giving the economy the right direction with the policies to implement to ensure we achieve growth. That, for me, is where I see the failings in the growth of Nigerian economy today.
So I want to talk about infrastructure. PwC brought out a report recently, was talking about the viability of debt capital. That's a very contentious issue in this country. It can unlock some, good money for us to be able to put into the economy. But I also want to talk about, the approach to infrastructure development. There's been this talk about, let's put the states in the party, let's make them more viable. Maybe we can rejig the exclusive list and things like that. Give them some concessions. They should be able to generate their own power, for instance. They should be able to, without putting to the national grid just to cater to themselves, they should be able to have their own independent rail line or federal rail line across board and things like that. I mean, what's your thought about that debt capital and, rejigging the institution to be able to say, okay, can the states be very viable to be able to bring in that level of infrastructure development? Because it's a very heavy load for the federal government, and that's why they can hardly go through the over 10 trillion budget they do every year, and they can't do anything as regards infrastructure.
Well, it's very simple. I mean, we don't need to talk about this all the time. I think the central bank is now putting together an infrastructure fund of close to about 12 trillion naira, which is a welcome development. But having said that, look, we have an infrastructure regulatory concessioning commission in Nigeria today. Ask yourself, how many infrastructure projects has that agency concessioned since it's been set up? So the low-hanging fruit, the airports and the privatization and the concessioning, it is clear that the federal government can no longer bear the burden. So it's important that critical infrastructure, they should concession that out or privatize some of these infrastructure. As you said, the debt capital and the private sector capital will flow into it. So the government really needs to look at private sector alternative funding into infrastructure. And like I told you, the laws are there. The concessioning laws are in place. In fact, the president can select 4 projects today, take it to the Federal Executive Council, get it approved, and he doesn't need to go to the National Assembly. And those concessionings will go on. That is the power of the presidency, and that is the potency of our laws, existing laws, to get things done. But, there needs to be the political will to get things done. So while the central bank is trying to put together a 12 trillion naira infrastructure fund, it's important that the government should let go of a lot of projects that they cannot fund. And from what I understand, a lot of consultants have done a lot of work, and we have identified close to about 9 trillion naira in bankable concessioning projects that are being held right now by the federal government of Nigeria. It's something that they can let go and open up the economy and free themselves of any fiscal responsibility. So like I said, the laws are there. It's the will to implement that is the challenge now.
The perennial challenge. We also have to talk about the devaluation of the naira, which you also identified in your report. What needs to be done there? I mean, you've identified it, but again, the lack of will, so I don't even know how to phrase the question, because you've actually given us the solution. The single window, market-driven mechanisms.
Yeah, it's unfortunate. For me, this is the saddest part of the whole thing, the way we have devalued our economy. And it's so sad because it's a very simple problem. All you need to do is to have a single window, you have a market-driven exchange mechanism, and you'll see that things will begin to happen. Look, this is not news. We've done it before. At a point in time, there was a lot of confidence in the domiciliary accounts in this country. 35% of all deposits were held in foreign currencies in domiciliary accounts in Nigeria at a point in time. But the central bank, through its policies, some people trying to be smart to try to corner 25 billion in remittance from diaspora, that is a significant amount of money. Our reserves are only 35 billion, and you have 25 billion coming in from the diaspora. This is money that can easily be channeled properly to stabilize our foreign exchange. If you give it a single window, a transparent market-driven mechanism, it's not a problem. It's not rocket science. And we also have a futures market. We have the non-deliverable forwards for foreign exchange that will remove any speculation. So if you're looking to deliver foreign exchange in a year's time and you have anxiety, buy a futures contract. You remove speculation from your market, you have a market-driven situation, and you will expand the supply of that market. People will have more confidence in that market, and before you know it, you'll have $35–40 billion coming in from the diaspora that will help stabilize the naira. So you need to move away from a static exchange rate mechanism and free up the naira. It's not rocket science, but why that is not being done, I'm lost for words on that.
Well, the CBN is always making this argument that it's so easy to say market forces, but what we so-called call market forces, not my word, the CBN word, is just 5% of the economy. I'm talking about the speculators, those that recently started selling the dollar to the naira over 500 naira, and then after some measures by the CBN, they dialed back a bit. So is there a conflict there? I don't know what your take on this, because that's the argument. The CBN governor, it's just 5%. The speculators and things, just 5% of those people. That's not the true value of the currency.
No, I don't want to get into the argument of whether it's 5% or not. The essence is the fact that when you have multiple windows, then you create the problem. So some people cannot be collecting money at 360 naira while someone are collecting at 390 or 380. When you have a single rate, all the other markets will align. It's happened before, and it's not rocket science. So let's get into that argument. A market is a market. If you have multiple windows in a market, you cause distortions and you cause speculation in that market. Have a proper market. You have a futures market that will take care of anybody who needs money in the future and remove speculation from that. That is why you have a non-deliverable forward market. So if you operate your markets properly and you eliminate the multiple windows, the naira will find its level and it will be available.
So you ended by posing a rhetorical question, and I want to put it to you for you to actually answer it and expand on it. Yes. Did the stark reality of a declining economy that lost $210 billion of its GDP put 100 million Nigerians into poverty, over 50% youth unemployment, fester into a violent uprising?
Definitely. I think that's without a doubt. If we cannot understand those linkages, and I think the previous guest you had on this program, I think he eloquently described those issues. The economic consequences of what has happened, I think, is what we're seeing that is manifesting itself. And I think that without a doubt, if we do not resolve all these issues, the end game will be the social unrest that we've seen. And I think it's important that we address this issue, address the poverty situation, and a lot of all the social intervention programs, we need to ensure that they're reaching the people that they need to reach, and we need to provide the palliatives, and we need to provide the succor to the economy. But again, if your economy is growing at 6% per annum, at the minimum, all these problems will disappear automatically. And that is really the silver bullet. If you can grow the Nigerian economy at 6%, you would remove 100 million people out of poverty. It's not rocket science.
But what were we doing? A lot of people were attributing to crude oil prices staying up at that time. We're growing the economy at that threshold, prior to 2015 and all of that, and everything just caved in all of a sudden. And secondly, what are we going to do to be able to ameliorate this over 55% unemployment and underemployment rate in the country? Because that's stark. What kind of jobs do Nigerians even need as we speak now? Manufacturing jobs, agric sector, a lot of people are touting agric, or service sector. What kind of economy do we even want to have, or should we be talking about now?
Well, you know that 25% of our GDP is agriculture, and you know that services is also a big part of that. ICT has been growing. So there's a lot of silver lining, and in between all these problems, you've seen that the ICT sector is the area that provides and the fintech area provides the hope for Nigerian economy. There are a lot of green shoots. Even throughout these problems, you saw that you were talking about FDIs were low, but within this period, I think Paystack was able to raise $200 million in the middle of a crisis. $200 million came into a company that was into fintech. So if we position our economy properly, I have faith in the Nigerian economy. It's a resilient economy. But what we need to do is we need to manage this economy properly. We need to provide the right incentives. The Nigerians are there. Even not to talk, before you go out to foreigners, there are many local investors here who, if you put the right incentives in place, will do the right expansion. So it's a question of putting the right incentives in place to grow this economy, so that not only do 100 million people become people who are productive and have disposable income. Then you can create aggregate demand and you can grow a proper economy and create a middle class. Once you do that, it's something we've done before, then we do not have a problem. So again, like I say, all these problems are surmountable. It requires political leadership, it requires the right policy, and it requires the right coordination of the right ministries and the right people with strong political leadership on the top to drive the growth. So I continue to have confidence in this economy that if we do the right things and we put the right policies in place, put the right managers in place, we will get the desired results.
I'd like your comments on the president's explaining that the budget of 2021 will be financed by new borrowings of 4.2 trillion naira and proceeds from privatization, which come up to about 205 billion naira.
Well, we don't know what is going to be privatized that will bring that money in. This is what I'm trying to say about cause and effect. You know, if you are going to make a statement like that, then you have to let us know that your privatization program is on track. But it's not. We haven't seen anything from the Bureau of Public Enterprise, and we have not seen any of the assets that they have slated for privatization or assets that they want to concession. It's very vague. So when you make these statements and you cannot back it up, then it becomes a problem, because it's very simple. The only thing I do is I do diligence. If I see a government policy or a government package, I sit down and I track it every quarter to see what they're doing, and if the policies reflect the growth that will be necessary to back up a lot of what they're saying. And if it's not there, then it's not going to happen. So it's important that we back up what our policies or our pronouncements with action. And I think this is really where we have that shortcoming. So that economic sustainability plan, it is important that we bring it out and we have people who are implementing and monitoring it so that we can get the desired results.
All right, two quick questions, and I want you to answer them quickly. Number one, you keep saying if there's right management and leadership, and I quit when I hear that, because we've got a team, a presidential, economic advisory council. Then we also have the one under the vice president. So we have multiple economic teams here and there, and the CBN with a lot of work. And you say there's not enough management of the economy. Moving on. Second from that, we ratified AFCTA recently. Is the Nigerian economy ready for the competition onslaught that will come as a result of that? Because we have a big market. A lot of people have been targeting the big Nigerian market. Free trade in that market will come with a lot of competition from our local producers. Are we ready for that?
Yes, we're ready for that. And I think it probably will be a wake-up call for us. And we have a lot of entrepreneurs who probably will begin to respond to that. And of course, we do have a comparative advantage. So I'm not worried about that. Things like that help us and gives us the wake-up call. Because we'll find out that if we're not competitive in certain areas, maybe all of a sudden you find out a lot of what we need is probably going to come from Cameroon or somebody closer, which is a lot better for us. So I think it's a step in the right direction, and I think it will create a very good stimulus for our economy to grow and provide a lot of our entrepreneurs opportunities. Because just as a lot of people want to enter our market, then it provides opportunities for Nigerians to also go into the whole of Africa. So it's a two-way street, and I think it's all positive.
I talked about the two broad things managing the economy, yet you keep saying if we manage properly.
Yes, you have all these things. It doesn't matter what you have. Okay, I'm asking you a question now. We're saying that we're going to exit the recession in first quarter 2021. Can you tell me who is responsible for that? There are all these committees that have come up with all these very good plans, but the question is who is implementing on a day-to-day basis? Who is coordinating? Who is monitoring to ensure that those numbers are there? We don't see that. Yes, all these committees have done their work. They've come up with very good plans. They've come up with a sustainability document. If you take a look at that, very well written, good plans, but we need implementation. So if you don't have implementation, monitoring, and leadership that is driving this whole process, then you will not get the desired results.
Well, thank you so much for joining us this morning, Mr. Adebajo.